Just books are here. Just two books. Okay.
So I welcome everybody. Good evening, and welcome to this another episode of Extra Bytes. And today is special. We are after a little gap of few days. We are again having back-to-back sessions over this weekend, and today is special with us. Special for all of you there on YouTube as well. Just to give you a brief background on Extra Bytes, if somebody is there for the first time. When a lockdown started, we were thinking of doing something because we realized one thing, that we cannot do photography. So that has come to a dead stop, full stop. And what can we do was in our thoughts. And I think that is when some of us decided to do something and give it back to the community that we have been associated with for so long, and that is given to us also continuously over the period of time. But we were not certain how to really go about it. And almost after 15-20 days of the lockdown start, we knew that what we have to do, and that is when we coined this word of extra bytes. We wanted to bring the extra bytes from people's lives, photographers' lives, and bring it face to face with all of you. And our first episode was telecast on 21st of April 2020. And today we are streaming our 56th episode. And today we have one special guest with us, Mahesh Bhatt sir. And before we get on with his introduction, let me just also share that apart from Mahesh sir, there are two other people are making their debut on Extra Bytes today, at least sharing the screen. And they are Sudhir Ramachandran sir and Vijay. I think everybody knows him because of Srishti Digi Life. So welcome Mahesh Bhatt sir, Sudhir sir, and Vijay ji. Welcome you.
Thank you.
To this platform, Extra Bytes today. And as usual, we have our Dinesh Khanna sir, who is going to be, now he's become a regular with Extra Bytes and even exploring light in many ways. And I will not go continue dabbling into it. So first of all, let me welcome you, Mahesh sir. Thank you for accepting the invite to be on this panel. And I hand over to Dinesh sir to take it further from here.
Jesse, with the number of sirs you keep saying now, it always makes me very nervous.
Absolutely. Well, I'm getting frightened.
I keep wondering, who is he talking about? It can't be me.
It must be Mahesh.
But thank you so much, Jesse. Thank you for creating this platform. Thank you for being generous enough to, go beyond what was probably your, core competence in terms of the kind of photography you've been doing and the kind of workshops you've been doing. I think that generosity has really made a big difference.
Yes.
And it's not something which will make the difference during the lockdown. I'm very clear that it's made a difference for posterity. So the kind of material you've gathered in terms of people's life journeys and experiences and influences when they're talking about their own work is absolutely invaluable. And I think their value really will be seen and felt by the next generation of photographers as we go ahead. So that's my thank you to you.
Thank you,
and Mahesh, thank you so much for agreeing to be here, to come and talk about your work in the journey. As you know, I've always been a great admirer of not just what you do as a photographer, but what you do as a human being. I asked Mahesh, so will you give me material from your website or elsewhere to talk about you, to introduce you? And he sent me these 3 lines, so which I'm going to read out now. He said, and I quote him, "Just say photographer, filmmaker, educator, who's deeply concerned about the state of our environment, rising inequality, and lack of the capability to think critically in society. So as you can see from these couple of sentences that he is not just an image maker, he makes images because he thinks, because he feels, because he wants to communicate and he wants to critique. And I think not just in today's times, any times, it's people like him who step up and at least want to make a difference. And he's made a difference, and I've seen that personally, having been involved with him as both a friend and as a photographer since the early 90s when, and I must now for a moment talk about Sudhir Ramachandran, who really in my mind is the godfather of Indian commercial photography. And I've seen Sudhir, put together the new schools in the 90s. And for me, especially, it was really valuable because that's the time when I was starting out as a photographer who knew virtually nothing in terms of how to do photography commercially, right? And I don't mean just in terms of how to make money out of it, but how to work in a studio, etc. And he put together these sessions and the new school in, I think, 91 and 93, was it, Sudhir?
Yeah, no, 91.
Which, is predating the internet time, is predating any kind of, ease of communication across international boundaries, etc. And he remarkably got photographers from all over the world to come and talk about their experiences. All right. Today we're sitting in these 5 boxes and people are watching us over YouTube. And it's so easy to be able to do that. So much so that one can't even imagine how tough it must have been to actually organize those in the 90s. And that's the time when I first met Sudhir, and I was totally in awe of him. But Mahesh, who was in his 20s, I think at that time, or maybe probably in his early 30s, was so involved with this and did so much work that it was absolutely remarkable. And that's really, from that time, I've known these 2 gentlemen and I've followed them and admired them for what they do, both in terms of photography and again in terms of their generosity to be able to share with whoever comes in contact with them their entire knowledge and experience of photography. So Mahesh, over to you. And we look forward to listening to you. And before I hand over to you, I must welcome Vijay, who's again someone who I met very recently, but already has, with the few conversations we've had, my admiration for what he's doing and how he is contributing to the world of photography is remarkable. Thank you, Vijay.
Thank you, Dinesh. Thank you.
Give it there.
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. And Jesse, thank you. Dinesh, thank you for having me this evening. Sudhir and Vijay, thank you for being here today. Talking together in the evening. So let me start. I started doing photography in the mid 80s. There was it was 80s. There was, I think 84 is when I finished my 12th standard, and by the time I had completely so bored of education is not even funny, I mean, college education I was talking about. I was wondering, why do we have to, just study what the teacher lecturer told you to, regurgitate the same thing in the exam, get some numbers at the end of it, and it just didn't make any sense. And there was no answers. Nobody could give any answers to any of those questions. And for us in the mid 80s, there was hardly anything other than becoming a doctor, engineer, lawyer. My dad was a lawyer. Or if nothing worked, then you do your BA, MA, and become a teacher, or a lecturer. So that was the last thing, So somehow it didn't go with me. I mean, I was not agreeable to any of these. paths. But one thing was, my uncle, one of my uncles, he used to subscribe for Newsweek magazine, and I think Newsweek. He used to subscribe to Newsweek and Time, but he used to hand those Newsweeks down to us, to some of his nephews. After he read, a couple of months later, they would come to a cousin of mine who was a doctor, and then whenever I went to his house, I would sit and read those magazines. And there used to be stories of Steve Jobs and Spielberg and George Lucas, and how the whole thing is, except Lucas, Spielberg, and Jobs, I think, were dropouts. They were dropouts of the education system, and did some amazing things. And I used to read these interviews with them, and I was really, really, it was amazing for me. I thought this was the way to go: drop out of college and do what you wanted to do. What to do was the question. Then there was another kind of an incident that happened, is that one of my cousins got married. So another cousin of mine, Gigi Rajendra Kumar, who has been my guru in the early stages of my work career, or as a photographer. He was taking some pictures. My cousin Rajendra at that time was he used to be a very keen amateur landscape photographer in the lines of zone system. He used to, was an ardent follower of Ansel Adams, and he had his own dark room, and he used to make this fabulous landscape images, because they have an estate in Poole, and make some gorgeous prints. And he was also an E6 processor for almost many photographers in fact. Not that there were many photographers who were there, commercial photographers. Raj used to process. So Raj was photographing this wedding with a Bronica 645, So, and that was like, I had not seen forget medium format. He had an Nikon FM2 or something, I can't remember which one, and a Bronica. And that looked amazing, I was 17 years old, and I was like looking at that Bronica with, what do you call, really with so much of amazement, and he of course wouldn't let me touch it. So, but then he said, but he explained to me what photography is, and during the wedding, between taking pictures. So that was fascinating, and I said, hey, this may be an interesting thing to do, So my brother, I asked my brother, who by then was already in the US, to get me a camera. For those who didn't know, it was a time of the license, Raj, and we had to pay about 250% duty if you had to own a camera in India legally. And owning anything more than one camera without paying duty was illegal. It was a crime.
Illegal. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh God.
Friends had even got raided, later on in Bangalore, owning cameras without paying duty, And so my brother got me an Olympus XA, which was a beautiful little rangefinder, really tiny camera, and I started taking pictures, And luckily, we could get, even I was in Bangalore. I was born and brought up in Bangalore, and luckily we were able to get some chemicals, at that time. That is, I used to use under the guidance of my cousin Raj, microdol developer, and sodium thiosulfate crystals for hypo making, and it was easy to get acetic acid to make top bath. So all you needed was that, and so I used to do my own processing and go to a local studio to print. So that's how I started off. It was mid 80s in Bangalore. What I was doing is that I used to, take a roll consisting of 36 frames, and the film that was available those days was Ilford FP4, and that was my choice of film, and 20 rupees a roll. That's what it was. And Of course, that 20 rupees a roll, the one roll of 36 frames had to last for at least 1 month, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So otherwise, where do you get money from to buy another roll? So you go out, shoot, come back, maybe 10 frames, cut it, process it. You know, that's how one learned. And so that's how one, started off. So that's the kind of thing that I started off. And the moment uh, the whole process of image making, of taking it, looking at the scene, making picture, uh, processing it, the you still don't know how it turned out. Even after it, you waited for the negatives to dry, then you take it to the dark room and make a print. You know, the whole excitement of that image unfurling in front of you was unfurling in front of me was absolutely magical. There was nothing more interesting than that for me. Then there's nothing more interesting than that for me even now. So that's how I started with photography. At the moment I made my first role of exposure, that was actually in Bangalore. I was visiting my cousin, and he gave me, even before I got my XA, I was visiting my cousin, and Raj, he gave me his FM2 and a roll of film, and he says, "Go and shoot and come back." I mean, he was generous. He said, "Okay, you shoot this entire roll and come back." So I took a walk from Racecourse Road. That's where his house was and is, and went all the way to Cubbon Park, and spent few hours. And those were the best times. You went as a photographer without a baggage.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. I mean, you didn't have to prove anything. You didn't have to impress anybody. You were just looking. So absolutely relaxing, absolutely beautiful. And so I came back, and I processed. He made me process the role, and then he looked at a couple of them. Oh, it's a good composition that you have it. They passed that judgment, and so that's the first part. And I still have those couple of frames from that role in my portfolio. It's on my website even today. So once I got hooked onto it, and I decided, I think within very couple of months of starting to make images, that this was the way to go. Photography was the way to go. Again, luckily for me, my cousin Raj used to get American Photographer magazine. Those days, I'm talking about 85, 86. And he also had this magazine called Camera and Creative Arts, which was like a phenomenal magazine on art photography. And he had books on photography, which I would sit and look at. He wouldn't let me borrow them, but he would let me see them in his house. So yeah, those were like really, really, it just opened up a new world for me. And I have all those magazines. When much later, he gave all of those magazines to me. I still have them. They are, I think, great treasures. Hopefully one day I'll scan everything and put it out for people to see. So that's how I started off. So I started, the moment I started off, I think I wanted to be an editorial photojournalist as those days. That's what I wanted to do. So I started doing photography, making stories, go out in Bangalore, make a picture or two, write something about it, send it to a local newspaper. They would publish it. And good thing is they used to pay those days, which might have been like 15 rupees a picture. That's fine. It's like you get a roll of film, right? So maybe, if you published a photo story with 2 pictures and some text, you will end up 75, 80 rupees, which is great because, you could buy another roll of film and, your chemicals and things like that. So that's how I started off. Published a lot in the local Kannada newspaper in Bangalore, and also, that the magazines from the Deccan Herald Stable, the newspapers from the Deccan Herald Stable. And then there used to be this newspaper called News Time that used to come from Hyderabad. They used to publish every week a half-page photo story, and I used to contribute to that. But, the printing was bad; it was terrible, but it didn't matter. Because your pictures were going out and getting published, and you're getting paid and do more. So that's the so that's how I started off. There was there was no photography schools, and except for the magazines my cousin had, there was nothing else that one could get off. And at one point in time, I used to visit Bangalore often, every few months, stay with him for a few days, hone my skills, and go back. During one of those visits, I met this young man who was just becoming a commercial photographer. His name, he's now, of course, he's very famous, D. Radhakrishnan. So Radha was my cousin introduced me as the most creative new photographer. He's on in the new most creative new photographer is coming up, and that was '86 or so. Radha was the young man, and he carried one cloth bag on his and always talked about creativity. Creativity was, he would have that word at least, in a minute, some 3 times that he would utter the word. So rather that day, I think Radha used to come to my cousin to get his E6 rolls for him, So that's how he himself, Radha used to come bringing his own rolls because he didn't have a sister.
Yeah.
He used to come to my wife also to process the rolls.
Yeah. And then he used to come to pick them up, and then the excitement in his face of those images, the transparent, was a what do you call, very infectious, for a young 17, 18-year-old. So then he would discuss with the Raj, and there big discussions and over several cups of coffee. Raj is a coffee planter, and the coffee was from their own estate. So a lot of creative time. So once Radha was going to do he was shooting for Canara Bank's annual reports, all mid-80s. So I went with him, carrying 2 lights with white umbrellas. That's all we had, no soft boxes. And I can't say assist, but carried those lights and helped him wherever he wanted for that brief time, couple of hours, which opened up another world for me at that time of also this shooting with lights, commercial photography, the possibility. So I decided that I should move to Bangalore, to do this. And I thought commercial photography would be a good way to earn a living and continue to do what you were doing. Okay. So it was this was '86 or so. So I had a bunch of photographs with me, black and white, editorial, photojournalistic. So I was wondering, I thought I should go to, by that time, India Today was a very big magazine, and they were doing these photo features, Raghu Rai, Prashant Panjar, Pramod Pushkarna, Bhawan Singh, their photo features were coming out, and highly inspirational, for the time. Even I think today they did a great amount of editorial photography. So I thought I should go to Delhi, meet some of these photographers, and show them my work, and ask them if I could be a photographer, hired me to be a photographer. So those days it was even difficult to meet other senior photographers, to ask, where do you get guidance from? We have in Mangalore, there is a photojournalist called Mr. Yagja, who's still practicing. He used to be my guide, apart from my cousin. I could go and talk to him and show my work, and he would, help me with composition, finer points of it. But others, who do you talk to? There was not many people to talk to. So I decided to go to Delhi. I took a train from Bangalore. It was called Jayanti Janata Express. I bought a 3rd class ticket. There was 3rd class in train those days. It was wooden benches. It was like a 4-day, 3-night journey. On a wooden bench. So, and I went, and it was a time of Khalistan movement, and everybody was scared that going to Delhi was dangerous. We were in South. There's nothing there. All peaceful, but we used to hear about this news that was happening in Punjab and Delhi, and but some of my parents allowed me. I had a camera, some clothes, and hopped onto the train one day. I keep telling it today that, when I look at my students saying that how our parents are constantly talking to their children on cell phone. Those days, 17-year-old, I traveled all the way to Delhi, and the only time my parents knew I landed safely was after I reached Delhi and wrote them a letter, because there was no phone in our house, to call them from there. There was no STD, you have to make a trunk call. So, that was okay. So I went to Delhi, and there was an incident that happened en route that laid the foundations for other things, which I'll come back to later. Dinesh, if I forget, please remind me to talk about it. So I landed
Don't lost my memory at all, okay?
I landed in Delhi, staying with my mother's friends. I think it was near IIT somewhere. Their house was it Munir? I think it was Munir. So then I used to go around, get appointments. The first person I met in Delhi, first photographer, was Mr. T.S. Satya, the great photojournalist. The moment he heard that there was a Kannadiga boy who had come to talk to him, he opened his doors. He was like, come, and he was so happy to see another Kannadiga wanting to be a photographer. So he called me and spent several hours looking at my pictures. Called his wife, introduced me in Kannada, and the whole language thing was.
Big wig.
Gave me coffee and looked at my pictures. So then he said, yeah, good work. Yes, you should be a photographer. He encouraged me. And then he said, what was I doing? I said, I was doing my degree because I didn't know what else to do. Some BSc I was enrolled into. And I told him that I wanted to quit and do photography. So like a good South Indian, he said, no, it's better to finish your degree first, and then you can do photography, is what he advised me. So then, I said I should meet Raghu Rai. I want to meet Raghu Rai. Can you help me to get a time? Because Raghu Rai, by then, was a big star anyway, and it was difficult to get time. He was busy, It was not that he didn't want to meet anybody, but he was as the photo editor of India Today, looking after so many photographers and stories, and he was a very busy man. So I think Raghu Rai by that time it was October. He was in Calcutta shooting for his book on Calcutta. So he was not there. There was something of that sort. So Satyan said, meet Paul. Meet his brother. I didn't even know Raghu Rai had a brother at that time. I said, this Paul's, meet Paul. And he gave me Paul's number. Tell him that I told you to meet him. That Satyan told me. And you should meet. He's a great guy, because then he mentored Raghu Rai, and then any young photographer should meet Paul. So of course he was talking to him. They were all in first name basis. They were contemporaries. So I called up Paul Saab, and he very graciously asked me to come over one morning. So I took an auto, bus, or whatever. It was quite far away, Ghaziabad, I guess, where he used to live. And I landed up in Paul Saab's house with my pictures. And he was, just the day before, 2 days before, there was a forest fire that had broken up in Bharatpur sanctuary. And he was, Paul Saab was already, he was a chief photographer of Indian Express at that time. But he was ready to go to cover this story of the Bharatpur sanctuary. But he made time for me. I can never forget that, because 1986, 87, 86, I was 19 years old, and to a senior photographer like him making time for a 19-year-old from Bangalore was really good. So he called me, and he was there was a cab waiting for outside, and also was shaving. Actually, he was sitting in his room, and there were transparencies all over, and really, the transparency is covered with bed sheets. So he looked at my pictures and says, yeah, good pictures. He said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to quit college and do photography. He said, good decision. I think it was Dheeraj. He said, I'm telling this boy to quit college. He's not doing it. I'm glad you're doing so. Do it. So for me, that was like, God speaking, or something of that sort. I said, okay, this is the word that I must take it as an omen, and I must do it. So I came back, and that was the only time I met Paul Saab, and I never met him afterwards. And that was his words that helped me. I came back and quit college, and to be a photographer. And it was 88 as I moved to Bangalore, and by the time Radha was already an established photographer. He was doing very well, shooting like 20 hours a day and all the time. And his assistant Kiran was ready, but in the ensuing few years, Radha had Kiran as an assistant, and Kiran was also ready to be a photographer at that time, because Radha himself was pushing. Nobody would leave Radha. Radha was like, "Now you go, start off on your own." And I still remember Kiran saying, "No, how can I do that?" And Radha saying, "No, you do it. I'll send you some assignment. Go." So Kiran, I was talking to Radha. Radha said, "Kiran needs an assistant." So I became Kiran's assistant. So Kiran's dad was the commissioner of police at that time. I remember I moved to Bangalore and sitting in police commissioner's residence and making cardboard softboxes. Sorry, styrofoam softbox because of boxes back then, right? So I worked with Kiran for some time as his assistant. So my whole introduction to industrial photography, still life, studio lighting, all happened in Kiran's studio. So then I got an opportunity to work on a book on Karnataka, and that was being anchored, led by another very dear friend of ours, Sudhir and mine, Jaydev. Jaydev is no more. He was a great man, and he was editing, his design agency Resource was editing this book, and he asked me to come over and work with him, because again, I had met Jaydev in Radha's studio many years ago. So there was a lot of these, happens, what do you call, maybe it's all by design, you meet different people, and things keep happening, So
it's called life.
Sorry?
Called life.
Yeah. And Sudhir's studio was right next to Jaydev's office, and they were neighbors, in Vasant Nagar at that time. So Sudhir too had contributed to that book. Sudhir again was still incredibly busy. 20, 22 hours a day he used to be shooting. And there were a couple of meetings. He came over to Jaydev's studio to talk about the book. And Jaydev would call Sudhir and said, "Can you please come over and give us some ideas, thoughts on what we're doing?" So that's when I saw, I think for the first time, a 4x5 transparency. Or Sudhir sometimes would pull out these 8x10s, and that was like, wow, this is amazing.
Mahesh, you must see his whole room full of films even now. You open the door, it will fall out of it.
So that's how. So the book was a turning point again. It was a great experience working on it. It was a pre-DTP, pre-computer time. There was a computer just to key in, but otherwise everything was done manually. I learned the art of bookmaking with Jaydev. So this is how. Then there was another interesting thing that happened is that there were a lot of young people had started doing commercial photography in Bangalore by that time. Kiran was there, Iqbal Muhammad, who now runs Light and Life Academy. He had just come back from the US, and we used to all hang out and talk, and and equipment was always an issue, So so at that time, we were, thing was that we should have an association was kind of coming. The whole talk was happening at various our peer meetings, maybe, or whenever we got together. So I think some people, I think Iqbal had gone and met Sudhir, and then since Sudhir was a neighbor at Jaydev's studio where I used to also work on this book. One fine day, I also went and met Sudhir and said, introduced myself and said, this is what I'm doing. And this was 88 or 89, 89 or so. And then an association, we should have an association. So Sudhir, if I remember right, he said, yeah, it should be national level. We didn't even have a local level at that time. He said, so he said, let's start on a local level. So I volunteered to go around and meet all photographers. We had meetings, and that's how IPA South started. That's Advertising Industrial Photographers Association of India South. There was already something in Bombay of which I think Sudhir was a member, and none of us. So we started off, and in our meeting, there are two things, I think three things that we had big problems for us. One was education, that we had no way to get information on anything those days, unless you got an American photographer or some British journal of photography, which used to come by sea mail. After 3 months, we used to get it, And the second was the issue with the equipment, the duties, which was tremendous, unaffordable, and I think even Radha's studio got raided by customs at one point in time. The third one was payments from agencies. 90 days, 120 days, 150 days, 180 days. After losing bill 3-4 times.
And photography cost money that time. We had to buy film, we had to do processing. It wasn't like buy press free thereafter.
I know. I mean, we used to call our good friend Naresh of RK Photo Guide to all our parties so that he gave us longer credit.
Yeah.
So he was a great guy who really supported us. That's how IPA started slowly. So I think Sudhir said, okay, let's start on education. Let's do workshops. A lot of workshops we organized. We used to meet at the Taj Gateway Hotel on the lobby cafe and talk. So much that I used to joke that the guy who was cleaning in the night, when he shook the curtains, photography, the words like photography and because we used to spend so much time there, so much time talking.
Very good.
Over endless cups of coffee and tea and planning, not just talking, planning workshops. And most of our workshops happened there. And
Can't hear you, Mahesh.
later, that was the vibrant scene of the 90s, and can you hear me now? Is the audio okay?
Yes.
So,
Oh God.
That was short-lived.
on the train to 86, which, though I was doing a lot of decent amount of commercial photography, my heart lay in editorial. That's my, I used to freelance for India Today at that time in Bangalore and some other newspapers and magazines. However, there's one incident which stood in my brain a long time was what happened in the train in 1986. My train from Bangalore to Delhi was on its
Mahesh, you're frozen.
I think his internet is a bit.
No, it's just a bit patchy in his place, he said.
Yeah.
Mahesh, you might have to. Mahesh, hello.
Yeah.
Can you repeat from the time when you were on the train, because we lost you there?
Okay. So I was in the train. The train reached Nagpur on the evening, second evening or whatever, I can't remember, but it was an evening, and it was it's a third class compartment, but fully booked out. So there was no space. But a young lady with a with a little baby boarded the train. And people said that is a book compartment, etc., etc. But then she begged and said that her father was ill because of this, the gas tragedy he had suffered, some health issues, and he was very ill. And she had gotten a telegram. Those are the days of telegram, right? To come to Bhopal immediately. So she had fought with her husband. She told all these stories. I still remember it. And somehow her brother-in-law brought her to the train station, got her a ticket, and put her into a compartment. So people took pity on her and said, "Okay, let her. She's anyway going to be there for only one night. So let her sit, in one of the empty seats there." So she sat, and the train started off. The next morning, it was going to reach Bhopal. And I was eating some biscuits, and her baby was hungrily looking at me, and so I gave the biscuits to the baby, and she started talking to me because I think she just wanted to vent, and she said that her mother had died in the tragedy, and I asked her if she had gotten any compensation. She said, "5,000 to mil gaya, 10,000 to mil gaya, 5,000 wo log kha gaye." So I said, who are these people? He said, the people who disbursed that 10,000 rupees took 5,000 from her, and that struck me as a great injustice, and I was really, I felt so bad about that, but there was nothing much I could do. However, after she left, I forgot about it, in the sense, in my conscious mind, the excitement of going to Delhi and meeting photographers, and etc. In the subconscious mind, it stayed, that the whole incident, and more than that, the injustice, stayed in my mind. Okay. So that was there all through, and by mid '90s, I was the thought, it kind of led to another realization that that our Indians at that time didn't have role models other than cricketers and film stars. While I know I keep repeating, saying that there is nothing wrong in film stars and cricketers being role models. There's some great people out there, but we do need other role models who are doing amazing work against great odds, with contribution to society against great odds. I was meeting them in the course of my work, and so I decided, why not do a book on them. So that was, the idea came to my mind in mid '90s, but that led to Unsung project that kind of came up. Let me come back to it again. My thought is streaming in a variety of directions. Before that, always for me, this publishing was a very important part of my being. I think my grandfather was a very big Kannada writer. He also self-published a lot of books. I'm talking about the early part of 20th century. So I think that some genes have passed on. So, again, when we were all doing this, involved in working on IPA and New School, etc., I had started. I wanted to do a magazine on photography, on visual thinking, not just photography, not about techniques of it, but visual thinking of it. So I had started, and ran a magazine called Light. Dinesh, if you would like to share that screen, which it's supposed to be a quarterly, which ran only for. I was able to publish only three issue one, yeah. Three what do you call issues in 3 years, because there was no there was hardly anybody to advertise in India, at that time. No companies, no photography companies, and this was an amazing. All my friends are here too. In the magazine, you can see. That was a very interesting thing that I did, and I interviewed photographers from the US, someone like you saw Albert Watson in the beginning. It's a very interesting story. There was no internet then. This is 96, 97. And so I somehow got in touch with Albert Watson. I got his fax number. The fax was, we used to communicate through fax. And in fact, all our IPA communication used to happen through fax. It was very expensive. And so this fax machine never stopped ringing. So I called Albert Watson, wrote to him saying that this is what I was trying to do, and that I wanted to interview him. He said, sure. He agreed to it, and said that I would interview, and he would agree for interview only if I had gone through his book Cyclops that he had just published. Where to get Cyclops from those days? Impossible. So I tried a lot. I couldn't get. So I wrote to him again and said, I can't get Cyclops. So he FedExed a copy to me, a signed copy, which someone stole much later. I don't have it anymore. Things like that. Then he said, you can do the interview with me on phone.
Phone.
Yeah, phone. So I used to call, I did a 10-minute interview with him across several days, because he could only give 2 or 3 minutes each time. He was so busy, He had shot 300 covers for American Vogue by that time, and he worked out of a 10,000 square feet studio in central Manhattan.
Wow.
Okay, he shot every day. He read a book every day. He saw a film every day. That's what it did. It was 60 rupees a minute to call the US. So I did a 10-minute call, 600 rupees. And I interviewed him on phone, and that's how it started off. Then there is. I spoke to Radhas in the book, T.V. Narayan, who's no more, the great designer, Suresh Natarajan, Radha, Sudhir, all were, we interviewed. I interviewed Laurie Kratokaville, the great photo editor, all on the phone, and somehow managed to bring.
Shantanu Shore as well.
Yeah, Shantanu. By that, that's another story of. So I'll come back to it because it's a very important story. So I was able to do only three issues, but people who've seen it remember it every time they meet me. And whenever I meet Dayanita Singh, generally is in some photo festival or the other, she says, you must bring that magazine out again. That's the standard thing. She's told me at least 5 or 6 times that we have met in the last few years. And I do want to, but I don't know how though. Maybe some other time. So that was one of the very interesting thing that I did. Liked. And
Mahesh, may I just mention for people who might be listening on YouTube that this is not something which is a website. This was a physical magazine printed on paper. So therefore, it's the very process, the actual production, and the distribution was all offline. It was in real time.
Yeah.
Because I want to say that because a lot of people, because if you've been born and brought up in the digital age, you don't even assume that there was anything earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a couple of thoughts, and I think that is that everybody would probably want to know. You started in a time when there was cameras. Getting cameras was difficult. Learning itself was a challenge because there were no schools of photography. There was no Google getting invented that point of time. Nothing was there. So people like us who have started in digital era, our lives have been very, very easy in terms of pursuing photography. We might make a kind of huge mountain out of a molehill, but actually it's been very, very easy. Now, a few things. How could somebody even think and say that I'm interested in photography? I mean, there is no camera, there is no inspiration, there are no images to look at. And suddenly, how could somebody get this thought that I would want to pursue photography? That is number one. Number two, when you are trying to take um, grab a commercial assignment and you're trying to look for inspiration and concepts, where do you look into? And even if you look into and even if you decide, how do you execute? Because there's no formal training that has gone into. There's almost impossible to really train yourself. So these kinds of things, how did you really go there and still execute? If you can throw some light onto that, it would be really inspiring.
Yeah, like for example, in the early stages, I wanted to read Ansel Adams's book, The Print and the Negative. Not available, no bookstore had even heard of. It's impossible to get it. So I
Sudhir has it.
Huh? No,
Sudhir has it, I think.
I have it now. I'm talking about those days. So I wrote to the United States Information Service in Chennai, and they actually sent from their library 2 books, The Print and the Negative, by registered post. There's no speed post or courier, to Mangalore, and said that you return this after a month. So that's how we did in those days, and later, that's how difficult it was. Later, when I moved to Bangalore, if I had to get a newspaper, a magazine like American Photo, I had to actually go and book that in advance with the news seller. It became a little easier after we started IPA, because then we could go to each other's studios. Like Sudhir, had, and I saw my first 8x10 in Sudhir's studio, and how Sudhir worked, how Radha worked, how they improvised. Without having all the equipment. Sudhir had a little better equipment than most of us, but he is a very generous teacher. He and Radha both gave a lot of tips, and how they worked. They were open. They are still totally open about what their craft, so we could actually go in and out, except when there was a client and shooting, we wouldn't go into that area. That's out of what do you call propriety. One wouldn't do that. Otherwise, I still remember Sudhir shooting an 8x10, trying to do some acrylic splashes, failing. That setup would be there for several days. Then that's how we learned. We would look at it and talk to him, or trying to get information, and I think the photographers in Delhi did Hardev. That brings me to Jesse, to New School. That's what we started off, and in 1991 we put it together in Bangalore. Sudhir, Radha, me, Kiran, quite a few others. Rama Tirumalacha, I must tell her name, because maybe one of the 2 women photographers in India at that time, women commercial photographers in India at that time, who worked against great odds to make a name for herself.
I think Mita Bedi's daughter was already working in Bombay.
Yes.
Yeah, Mittal Bedi.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Preeti, Rama, and Ritu Nanda perhaps were the only 3 commercial photographers at that time.
Not in the early 90s, I don't think so yet.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the New School was when
we. And what about Palan Daruvala?
Yeah, Palan was there. He was, I think he was a member of IPA, but he he's a great friend. So, but he was not actively involved in putting this together. But not everybody was. That was all right, yeah. And as long as they were all, in the same fraternity. So that's so New School was a turning point. Jesse, New School 91. It was such an exciting time that we were able to get photographers like Adrian Flowers from London and Hideki Fuji, the great fashion photographer from Japan. And even to get and again, this happened all on international calls, 60 rupees a minute. Fax machines whirring all the time, and we also had a lot of great Indian photographers. That's when Shantanu Shauri, Pradeep Das Gupta, Ashok Salyan, art directors came together. First time photographers, art directors everybody came together on a platform, So let me revisit the
And
story.
again, Jesse, the platform is not digital; it's a physical place.
Yeah, I can.
I'm sorry to keep interjecting because I know that people don't keep going back to कि अच्छा वो Zoom पे हो रहा था or something. It's not.
No, these things are very, very important, and they are kind of an eye opener for the digital age photographers, because we take the word passion very, very lightly and very casually, and one or maybe a string of setbacks, and we are off to looking at something else. And here somebody is trying to manage without a camera, without any education, without reference. Getting a book itself is a hassle. Looking at the images without getting paid from the client is another challenge. So this is what real passion is, because you are working against all odds.
We did. It's like I just wanted to come back to the story of Vijay talked about Shantanu. Very important thing that happened is that Shantanu by that time was he was the top fashion advertising photographer of the country. He was very busy working out of his studio in Kemp's Corner in Bombay. He was a star, and we wanted Shantanu to come and talk to us at New School. And I was in Bombay. I was staying there and trying to meet him and Ashok and other photographers to talk to them about IPA and New School and invite them to get their time. I couldn't meet Shantanu. There's no way. I couldn't even go past the telephone first, call also. So then I called Sudhir and said I am unable to meet him. So Sudhir sent a fax again to Shantanu. I still have a copy of it, which I've posted somewhere on Facebook once, which says that Mahesh is waiting. Therefore, can you please meet him? Since Sudhir and Shantanu, they're in the same bracket. They were all peers. That worked, and so I got an appointment at Shantanu's studio. That was after you wrote a letter to Shantanu, faxed the letter. So I went to Shantanu's studio in the Kemp's Corner. Shantanu's studio had two doors. You press the bell and the door would open, and behind you, all you see is another door. So his assistant came and said, and all like. So I said, okay, Shantanu said, "Sabse milna hai, Mahesh." But he said, wait and go inside, come back. Then door would open, and Shantanu welcomed me, and then we spoke, and that was and his studio was another amazing experience of shoot.
What a lovely place that was.
Studio, and it's pick and span table, and he would be sitting there making his images. Just great experience, and Shantanu and I instantly hit.
Shantanu has a different class altogether.
Yeah, we became very good friends, and it was the first time I saw Aishwarya Rai in Shantanu's studio. She was getting a screen test. She was not even a model. Nobody even knew of her. And I couldn't actually take my eyes off Aishwarya. Shantanu is talking to her. I'm like looking at her,
Correct.
No, she looked ethereal. She had that transparent kind of. She was just stunning, absolutely.
So Shantanu came over to New School 91. We had a great time. We all became great friends, and then it was such a fantastic time in Bangalore at Western Hotel, which was out of the world. And then Shantanu and I remained friends for all the time. All through the travels of life, and then later, when Shantanu got into education, he called me and said, "You must come and work with me." That's how the One School Goa came about. Where I went to Goa and helped him set up and worked there for 2 years to set it off, and then I came back. So everything one step leading to another, and the beauty of life, as making things happen. it has been a great experience.
Mahesh, I wanted to ask you something. I mean, in fact, this question is actually very relevant even to Dinesh and also to Sudhir and you, because you have also seen the analog uh, industry, the world, and also now the digital world. Now, as someone who's used to film photography so extensively in your era, and was at the forefront of the digital transition, if you see, what do you think that the film photography could provide and enable for the generation of photographers now who are started only with digital?
I think it's slow learning is very important.
Yeah.
I think to just the whole process of looking at an image, you have 36 exposures only, and you get your images within that, and therefore, or maybe even less number of frames, and you don't know how it has turned out till you process it and then you print it, and how could you interpret that negative in different ways and print it differently. All this takes a long time,
Yeah.
to come through, and therefore this slowness in learning is very important. That's why I think it's a very important part of I'm not the one to say I'll never diss digital. It's a great thing I use. I'm a digital photographer all the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Been doing so for a long time, but the allure of film has never gone away from me. So I really like, because it helps bring that discipline. And even today, I shoot very little, because I come from the film era.
Yeah.
Usually, I hear photographers running through their SD cards or whatever other cards, but I never get have to, because I got my frame within the few frames that I got my image within the few frames that I shoot.
Lovely.
So that's why we have set up a beautiful darkroom, which
Yeah, absolutely.
institute,
Yeah.
and we're trying to
And
keep it going, keep that going.
yeah.
Yeah, sir.
Yeah.
One small question in extension to what Vijay is saying. I also had a similar thing to ask you, because you've seen, you are one individual who's not only done photography in film era and transitioned into digital era and seen that change happening. You've also been a part of photography school at that point of time, and you've been teaching students or desirous photographers at that point of time, and now also you're teaching. So what has been your experience in particular about in terms of the kind of teaching habits, the learning habits that the photographers are coming out with now, and what is the major difference in with the students you were getting that time and now, and in terms of even your experience in teaching, has there been a drastic change, and were you also supposed to adopt to the changing scenario, or was it a smooth transition?
See, the thing is that the new school, what we did was we were actually teaching ourselves and learning at that time. It was we were not. I think we were facilitators of that. And it was basically a seminar series, and then we were also learners. We learned one hell of a lot by listening. By the way, in fact, I had the audio recordings of New School '91, and I have recently shared it with Sudhir and Dinesh and others, etc. Maybe we'll put it up on YouTube, SoundCloud someday. And so that was. So we were all hungry. All of us were so hungry to understand, learn, and see how things could be done. So that was what it was at that time.
I may add one thing about New School. I just started out in photography at that time after spending a dozen years in advertising. So 91 for me, it was actually such a opportune thing that this happened. Because like I said, I was totally uneducated as far as commercial photography was concerned, or studio photography was concerned. And I think the most wonderful thing which happened for me with New School was that there was so much information suddenly which was made available that I was left with so many more questions, rather than answers. So it's actually over the next few years that I was now trying to decode and understand and deconstruct what I saw and what I heard. Because there was, again, it was something which you had experienced then. It wasn't like a YouTube, video which you could pause and then go back and say, now let me see. It was all real time. It was all real life. And you stayed with that. You kept that. And, those are the things which I really feel probably are the change between the analog time and the digital time, that you carried experience, you carried knowledge, you made sure it got embedded in you. But when you don't have to, for instance, going back to the point about, which Mahesh very eloquently made about slow photography, I think it's something which should be practiced even today. It's just not about the slow process of making the image. It's about, in terms of film or the CF card, it's about the slow process in terms of how you engage as a human being. I think that's what is really essential. And I think that is what photography schools and mentors ought to inculcate in people's minds. That, don't think that you got it and get on with it, or don't think that you get 100 pictures and they will get one, pre-visualize, preconceive, slow down, let it all, happen in your mind. I mean, that is something which I hope Sudhir will talk about, because he actually says it so eloquently. But it's no, really, I mean that. And so I just wanted to add that little bit. And, so that's what the thing like New School was really about. And just one little more thing which I want to talk about, which Mahesh did mention about people in Bangalore, etc. Spending time together, speaking to each other, exchanging ideas. In Delhi, for instance, it took me many years to build up any kind of equipment base. But I didn't have to worry, because if I had an assignment which required a wide angle lens for my 4x5, which I had somehow managed to buy a Hosman, all I had to do was to call up Pradeep or call up Siddharth or call up Hardevji, and they would send it over. One worked with borrowed lenses and borrowed cameras for years. It's like, I spent 15 years shooting on a 4x5 camera, but I never learned how to load the film because I was terrified of loading film. So what I used to do, I bought extra bags. The night before the shoot, I used to send those bags to Hardevji's studio and get them loaded by them. So I was known as the guy who had too many 4x5 bags. And after a while, because then they used to say, "Arey, aap photography to theek karte ho yaar, film load karna bhi to seekh lo." And I actually switched to using a large format with the 6x9 bag, because that was easier to load. So I wanted the effect of the 4x5 camera and the the tilt shift and all that. But I was shooting with 120 film. So, that's how you kind of adapted, and you had to put in your thought, you had to think of what I do and, what I want to achieve. And that is what's very important. Mahesh.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest problems we had was how not to get magenta cast on transparency film.
We had Hardev Singh.
No,
we had two studios which are wow.
So is Sudhir. Sudhir had cracked it. All the transparencies had magenta cast, so these transparencies was fine. Because he produced it himself.
Instead of 6 minutes in the first developer, you put it for 5 or 5.15, depending on how much you push or pull the transparency or the negative. So you could control cyan and magenta just or digital kind of like today. Everything was controlled on the sheets. That's why if you go back 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, I can pull out every page of any assignment at any date and tell you sheet by sheet, aperture by aperture, in transparency, slides, black and white, color negative, and 8x10s, entire thing in each one, even today, at any point of time, The last 40 years, yeah, easy, very easy.
If I may add one more thing which mentioned to me.
This is what I meant.
Yeah. you know that in when you're doing school and you're doing science, you know, so it's the PCBM, right? It's physics, chemistry, biology, and maths. As a science student, that's what you study. So he said that when you are working as an analog photographer, you had to understand the PCBM of photography, the physics of light, the chemistry of film, the biology of human beings, okay, and the maths of exposure. That's and that's how you learn photography. And while you were learning that, and you spent a few years understanding the physics and the chemistry, you honed your vision.
Yeah.
So,
You know that
go ahead.
that actually I wanted to ask you this question again to Mahesh again. Now, with all this said, now do you think that how crucial is for this new age artists? I mean, does the absence of this authority on analog photography in the country is it diminishing the chances for the new age artists? I mean, not able to learn the process and gain insights into how the entire process is done.
Well, I think there are a few youngsters who are coming out. They're interested in this process and they're working on it right now, and that's good. I think the kind of a rejuvenation of analog photography, slow photography, and other processes, perhaps will help us going forward. You know, I think we do need a little more.
You have an entire course on analog, right, Mahesh? Even now
at Srishti.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. We do have the negative, darkroom, etc. We do have workshops and courses that we start. But as you know, we have just begun with that. It'll take a few years before we can, because it needs practice, right? So
absolutely. Yeah.
Printing is a lot of practice.
Yeah, if I may say for a moment, the importance of thinking, of using the mind, just getting wow shots, but understand that wow is only a bodily reaction of, an emotion, and the feeling comes in the brain. I mean, we have to study how the brain works and so on. I don't want to go through it. But how do you get the feeling? Therefore, someone says, wow, but after some time they'll come and say, but I don't like it because. So the brain started kicking in and started thinking about it. And this is how we even work with clients, or clients work consumers. So I'm saying that, how do you think when you shoot a picture? And that is where the process of thinking, planning, feeling, emptying ourselves, taking the consumer in, like Ivan Arthur described in Newsweek 91, where you do a transmigration of the soul of the consumer and the human, of the person who's the image maker. That whole process comes when you have that, what Mahesh described, disciplined approach. And I think that's where analog will help.
Yeah.
And so that instant shot and instant gratification is important, but it'll go away. It'll never be perennial. And to make that art and to put that whole thing together, that's what that needs that analog approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that what Sudhir mentioned earlier, Vijay, is of that keeping that record. I'm not meticulously kept, but that is important. I've seen his book, where each shot would have a diagram, Polaroid.
Yes, that's brilliant, actually.
Where the lights or what kind of softbox, what light, what aperture, what the whole film process.
No one is allowed. Every shot for the day has to be written, drawn. Transparencies will be stuck in any book, any point. That means we shot, we handed over, but extra transparencies are stuck in the book. Polaroids are stuck. And that's the discipline. So the idea is, when you shoot 10 brands of watches, the next brand, I don't want to repeat the same way.
Yeah.
Okay, go back to these books. So I insist that everyone starts creating and thinking that. And that is the analog approach that somehow helps today rather than put it in a box and then just shoot the watch. No, no, very different. And I think that's how the creative aspects come out, whether you're a still life or you're someone like Mahesh going and looking for social change in terms of photography. Yeah, they are.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing in many photographer studios in New York as well. Hans Nelleman, so meticulous record keepers, meticulous. When you shoot, and everything is recorded beautifully, everything. So that is a very important part in education. I think record keeping, archiving, and Vijay.
Yeah.
So I just want to now from there to move a little ahead into my unsung project, which I think has been a kind of a very defining time for me. I spoke about that incident in the train, and much later in mid 90s, when I realized that the very few role models, and I wanted to do it and thought of doing a book. The reason for doing a book because shelf life. I have 80, 85, 100-year-old books in my library, which came down from my dad's library. So that's why the book was important, and I started working on it in 2004. And again, crowdfunding, etc., didn't exist, and I didn't want to go to a publisher because publishers, all they wanted to do was, okay, you bring the money, you make the book, and I'll give you 100 books back or 50 books back. That's about it. So I said I should publish it myself. I knew how to make books because I had worked with Jaydev on several book projects. So I decided that one way to crowdfund would be to go and talk to some big companies and ask them to underwrite certain number of copies and give me the money, convince them to give me the money in advance. So I first thing I know Nandan Nilekani for a very long time, from the mid 90s. When they were a very small company, even before they went public, kind of thing. So I went to Nandan, and those days I could get an appointment with him rather easily. So I called him up, went to his office in Electronic City, and pitched the idea, and he said, "Okay, let's do it." One thing that and his marketing team told me that if Infosys cannot support this project, no one else can. And so they came forward to say that they would buy X number of copies, but give me some money in advance, make the book. And I also put a rider saying that, don't ask me when am I going to give this book to you. I will give it, but you cannot ask me when. Okay, I don't know. So he said, okay to that also, you see. And so that's how it started off. And then I roped in Anita Pratap to write the book. Anita Pratap, for many people today's generation may not know who Anita Pratap is. She's definitely one of the finest journalists India has ever seen. She was the only one who interviewed Prabhakaran of LTTE during the heights of thing, and going down in Jaffna, cycling alone, a single woman, going to his hideout meeting. She witnessed the demolition of Babri Masjid, Taliban takeover of Kabul. Just been there, done that as a journalist. Amazing lady. So she agreed to. She also wanted. She had retired from journalism by that time, but she thought it was an inspirational project, and she wanted to write. So she agreed, and so I started looking for stories. I said inspirational Indians who have contributed to society against personal odds. The personal odds are always money, gender, terrain, religion. It could be anything. So therefore, it completely the philanthropist billionaires were taken out of the equation because there was no odds there. They didn't have to face personal odds. So I started getting trying to get the stories. Again, even 2004, internet was not ubiquitous in India. So I talked to developmental journalists who were friends of mine, asked them for names, kept my eyes and ears open for newspaper stories. So that's how I got the names of people whom I could go and meet. Chewang Norfel, who made glaciers in the Ladakh Himalayas, to Subhashini Mistry, an illiterate worker, laborer who built a hospital in Calcutta. So found 9 stories. It took us 3 years and multiple visits to shoot, photograph, to make the book. On the way, as and when I completed a milestone, I would go back to various people and ask for money, asking them to underwrite copies. Like Infosys bought some more books, underwrote, booked some more books. I went to Brigade Group in Bangalore, again through Jaydev. Then I used to photograph for Verve magazine, which is run by Anuradha Mahindra. I used to shoot for them. I had even shot for them in the issue 1, volume 1. So Anuradha, I sent a proposal to Anuradha for them to support us, Mahindras. So she sent it to Mr. Mahindra's office, and they supported it. I used my contact, my goodwill, good offices everywhere to get money. So by 2007, I had sold about 3,000 copies. Even before the book came out. And that's how, at 500 rupees a copy, so I had 15 lakh, which had gone out in travel of mine and Anita. And then I think book printing itself cost 7.5 lakhs at that time.
This is the first volume you're talking about?
First volume, yeah. So the first volume came out in 2007, and I again went out selling it. Bookstores were there at that time, so that was okay. Then again, bulk, but like I walked into. I made some friends also in the bargain. I just Subrata Bagchi had set up Mindtree. I set up an appointment. I didn't know him. Didn't know him at all. So I went to his office and I said, "This is what I'm doing. Can you help me?" So he helped. He supported me, and then we became friends over a period of time. Then after the book was done, I went into the Indian Institute of Management. I sent a copy to the director, Professor Pankaj Chandra. I didn't know him. So he called me over, and then he was so impressed with it. And he called all the people who were featured in the book to come to IIM Bangalore, talk to students. So it became a lecture series. Another professor at IIM used it as case study. So it really did very well.
So I think if for people who are watching it, I think this is the book, Unsung Book, is about a series of people who have made extraordinary contribution to the society against personal odds. I think that's what the first volume is about. Correct, Mahesh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Samar Jodha sir is there on YouTube. So he has made a couple of comments. So let me just read it. The last comment is that unsung, such critical body of work of everyday ordinary folks with extraordinary lives.
Yeah,
that's what he's saying. And about New School also is mentioned. So New School was a remarkable gathering, considering Indian photography was on a total disconnect with other worlds of photography. An era of analog when one engaged with the craft and not carpet bombed to work on post.
Yeah. So that was about New School. I must also tell you that let me just go back to again, because Samar's comment brought me some memories. I must share this because the funding for all these activities. Okay, we had some sponsors, but I must put it out on record saying, like, people like Sudhir, Hardev, Radha, they have put a lot of their personal money also into it. They won't talk about it, but they have spent paid bills, without them doing all that, this wouldn't have happened. The New School wouldn't have, that's a very important thing that, that we must remember. They've done a lot of work. I mean, even when I did Light, Sudhir had, helped me, to put it. I must tell you that, it's important. So
Sudhir is an incredible human being, actually. I think a lot of people who doesn't know him, I think they should go and do a lot of research about him. He's been there in the industry.
Then we'll be talking to him to try and get him to do a talk about his journey.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
The fraternity, the cordiality that existed and still exists amongst us, is very important. That's one thing that perhaps I don't know if it is there in photographic circles in India or not at this point.
Right.
No, that's exactly my question, Mahesh. Next question is, I mean, the empathy among photographers doing such wonderful work, does it even exist now? I know it's something that I think the youngsters should need to rethink and revisit the way they do their work, honestly,
Right, absolutely.
So
that happened, and then Unsung again. Coming back to Unsung is that I was like the first book itself had taken a lot out of me. I said there. It sold well, and we were not out of pocket, but but Dinesh was telling me often that asking me to do another book, and that he would want to work on it and with me if I did another book. So, but I always said, yeah, I would do it, but where's the money?
Yeah.
By the time this one day I got a email. This was, I'm talking about 2008, 9 or whatever.
Sorry to interrupt you. Would you want me to show unsung work? We haven't shown.
That's okay. I mean, you can just put it up on screen and people can see it later.
Okay.
Unsung.in. The website is unsung. There's a lot of content in it.
Let me just share screen for a couple of minutes while it is going.
Yeah.
You can speak on.
Yeah. So one Mr. Madhusudan Naidu sent me an email saying that he was so inspired by Unsung, the first one, that he wanted to meet me. So I met him a couple of days later in Bangalore city over coffee, and he said he kept on insisting that I must do another book. So I told him the only issue is money. So he's like, how much do you need? So I said, I need at least about 9 lakhs to make it. And a week later, he came up to me with 2 checks, amounting to that 9 lakhs, and gave it to me. He said, go and do your book. It was like, Madhusudan is a financial an advisor, and he has clients to whom he says that the return on investment. He says, he told me that I tell my clients that return on your investment is not always money, and some of your investment must also be to generate goodwill and for the good of the society. So
absolutely,
that's how the funding for second book came up. 2 of his clients funded that book. One of them, Abhijit Palit, is now a trustee in Unsung Foundation. We remain friends, And so the second book came out in
2016.
In 2016, sorry. And so I thought that was it, for the project. That features, but the one thing is that there are other photographers came. There's Sudhir, there's Amit Mehra, there's Jyoti Karat, Prashant Panjar, Namas Bhojani, and several other writers who took part in it and made the book happen. So that's the second issue that came out. And again, in 2017, Dinesh came back and said, would you do it for Serendipity Festival that he was curating? He and Prashant were curating. So I said, okay, let's do it again as a third one, which is called the Extraordinary Grandeur of Smallness, celebrating the extraordinary grandeur of smallness, which was inspired by a book on mosses of all things. And that happened because Dinesh prodded me to do it, and the Serendipity Arts Foundation was generous in their support. We had 5 women photographers work on it. I decided let's have only women working on this story. So that came up as a beautiful, beautiful show in Goa at the Serendipity Arts Festival in 2017. maybe it'll become a book at some other point in time. So all this was happening, and I said, okay, this is it. And then, Google said, okay, let's put this up in Google Arts project. And so we had to set up a foundation for that. So I did that. And for a long time, I was thinking that, that we should need to have set up a grant. I wanted to set up a grant to do photography. And I kind of, Unsung Foundation happened. And then I said, again, I come back to Jaydev, who is a great friend of mine. Jaydev had passed away by that time due to, he passed away early. He got that for a longer time. And I thought I should do it in his name because his contribution to my life has been enormous. And he has been a great, supporter of Indian photography. And he's been a friend, through the very difficult years of Indian photography. He's been, with us. He was with us all through New School and IPA as a friend, a guest all the time. So very close to Sudhir and I and Radha, very, very close in his memory. So the first grant happened in 2019, and that was again supported by various photographers. It was a no strings attached grant in the sense people can't apply for it, but we nominate and then we select. An independent jury selects it. So the first grant came up in 2019. The grant itself was supported by Jaydev's very dear friend, Mr. Ananta, who is he's a businessman in Bangalore, and Sudhir again, Tarun Khiwal, Dinesh, and Ashish Chawla, Arjun Karta. Arjun Karta was a protege of Jaydev. Arjun Karta is a wedding photographer. Yeah. So all of them supported, and we gave the award to
Karan Diaz.
Who was now in the US doing a master. She was going up to a master. She is one of the photographers who participated in Unsung B. And he came over to Srishti Institute of Art from Srishti Digilife. And then I was explaining to him and his team about this award, and he said, I'm there, I will support the project from Srishti, So at that time, so then it morphed into Unsung Srishti grant for documentary photography, which was launched last year. And Vijay and his team, Shivani, have been incredibly generous, incredibly great to work with. And we nominated 3 photographers, independent jury of Dinesh Khanna and Aisha Abraham. Aisha is my colleague at Srishti Institute. She's an artist of great repute. They selected Zazo, who is a Nagaland-based photographer. The first inaugural Unsung Srishti Digilife grant for photography. So we hope to continue it over the next few years.
It will continue, Mahesh.
Yeah.
It will continue, and it will get bigger.
Yeah.
And I'm sure with support from Sudhir, Dinesh, I think it will with all good hearts around, it will go bigger.
Yeah. So that's been happened. So that's where Unsung is. Been a very interesting, and very satisfying journey so far. And hopefully it'll go, further and further and further. So that's where
also,
I am.
You also managed to collect funds which you disbursed to some of the unsung heroes, right? Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, the first book, I didn't collect. It is not. Unsung became a funnel. The book became a funnel. We didn't collect any money because the book was there and we had given the contact details. People went and gave awards, grants, supported there. So it funneled. I kept a track of it actually in the beginning, and because people, I'm in touch with many of the heroes that I featured in the. Keep talking to each other once in a while, and they kept saying that, hey, somebody read about me in your book and came and gave me this money. So it helped raise about 90 lakhs. To
Wow.
Brilliant. Yeah. So
imagine such a powerful visual storytelling is such a powerful medium.
Right.
I think I really wish the entire new generation artists, I would love if they can understand and they voice out such stories through their visual storytelling, which can probably bring up lives for many others, like what you've done, Mahesh. I'm sure it will be an inspiring story for a lot of people to read through. I mean, I would really recommend everybody to go through Unsung's website and go through all the work that Mahesh has done.
Yeah, so that's where I am now, and now I of course teach. It was one school, Goa, in the first 2 years of my professional teaching, and then now in the last 4 years at Srishti Institute of Art, Design, and Technology in Bangalore. It's fantastic to be with young people, keep me very young. Being with the 18 to 25-year-olds is just fabulous. I love my students. Of course, they irritate you no end, but that's a beautiful. We irritate them, teachers, but we are friends. Jesse, I was telling you that you were calling all of us, sir. My 18-year-old student calls me Mahesh. All of we are all of us same basis. The tone of Mahesh changes. It's like Mahesh. So that's but it's just fabulous to be with young people and constantly. It's just amazing to see them graduate, go into their own lives, and and blossom. I'm sure people like Sudhir and Radha and all have seen that happening with their assistants. Who were assistants one day, and then slowly over a period of time they blossom, they go out and they become
taking this opportunity, Mahesh, I should also tell you that after we started that grant together with you for the documentary and photojournalism artists, I've been going through visiting a lot of these photojournalists across India. I've been there visiting their profiles and whatnot. If you look at the new generation artists, people like Anushri Fandwis, Soumya Kandelwal, Ashima Narayan, all these people are doing a phenomenal job, especially Soumya. Soumya has covered so many of lives of these daily wage workers during COVID, which has also it helped them get funding from all these people. That's lovely of these new generation artists to do all this. It's also very heartwarming to see all that.
Right, absolutely.
And having said that, I have a question now. I mean, probably. How do you actually how do you want these new generation artists in the field of photojournalism? How do you approach a sensitive issue that you are being commissioned to shoot? Do you really detach yourself from the conflicts to present an unprejudiced picture, or does your knowledge and intimacy on the subject help bring tell the story better?
See, I think it's impossible to be completely independent, because you have your own feelings that kind of color you. I wouldn't say color in the negative sense, but add a dimension to your stories. All right. So
yeah,
I have found it always pretty difficult to. This experience have been really difficult. Whether to, I have photographed the aftermath of tsunami in Sri Lanka. I have photographed the war in Sri Lanka. Then even difficulties in India, and even the aftermaths. Aftermaths are very difficult as well. So it's you have to basically say, that you are. I don't have an illusion that I'm there to bring about change. I'm just trying to tell myself when I
absolutely
shoot, I'm doing my job. as a reporter, as a journalist, as a photographer, as a visual storyteller, to take that story, to as many people as I can. So that's what we have to do. So I think one thing that I would want tell people, everybody, I keep telling myself, is that you shouldn't believe in your own hype. So that's because today is the time of old hype. So this I read actually in a Newsweek story many years ago, in my formative years, when Steve Jobs was thrown out of Apple, and there was an article on it in Newsweek, and it said Steve Jobs believed too much in his own hype, so that was his downfall. So that has stuck with me. I think they should not, all of us, should not believe in our own hype. I think that would keep us grounded.
Absolutely. Well said. Yeah.
Very well said. Very well.
And Sudhir, your thoughts on it, Sudhir?
Well, I think when you talk about photojournalism, it's so much like when we actually try to get a lot of empathetic thoughts when we work with a brand or we work with with any story that I'm building up, because they're all stories eventually. So now let's say in Mahesh's case, we are looking at the unsung hero himself as a protagonist, and we have the have-nots on the other side, the victims, the social injustice, and so on. But I think between two, while that dialogue is going on, there's also a dialogue between Mahesh and the scene, where he is not only removing their mask, but he has to remove his mask and become vulnerable. So this whole concept of hype, I agree with that, because you are becoming totally vulnerable. And that means you are flowing with it, emotionally you are connecting with it, but you are so obsessed with the picturizing of it, because the picturizing is what you are taking from that scene and that emotion and connecting with an audience. That's your job, that's the duty. And that's how you're born and made, and your DNA is like that.
Yeah.
No other thought in your mind, period. So when you're working like that, when I go with my team, and let's say I'm doing a mall, and I want to do, I come to know that that mall has got a bigger mall on the next door, and they got a competition. I enjoy it because I'm doing an ethnography trust to understand the body language and understanding a lot of things. Slowly, I'm becoming like them, like the demography which is in front of me.
Yeah.
And then absorbing that psychography, opening everything is like opening the kimono, like you're totally vulnerable.
Yeah.
That's when you really become human and you become so connected that there's a different energy. And that energy has not changed from the 4-year-old me, I'm sure, to 10-year-old, and when I see my grandson and so on. Those energies don't change. They're absolutely the same.
Absolutely.
Not in one iota, it cannot come down. Fuck, man, it can't come down. And that is the way it is. That's the way I go into it. Totally absorbed.
Yeah.
So then there is no compromise, right? There's no compromise. When I talk about all this is how you engage so deeply that it's like they become your family. So what Mahesh has done in his job, and we are all photographers, but what he is doing and getting into that is a very, not only it is, mind games and psychologically and cognitive forces that is connecting, cognitive actually, but there is the attentive also, the emotional aspect which you got to understand. And unless that is understood very clearly how it works, it is amazing, because I see huge opportunities during this time. And what he has done, he should be the pioneer of this, because the way he's been able to communicate social injustice. From the time he's talking about the train, I read it in a 2014, I think it was a 2013 post at that time. And from that time, the journey, and then you also spoke about it in your TED Talks. I mean, that is the emotion that took him across. How many photographers think like that? And I think that is the duty that we need to do. When you say give back, give back, give back is not to give back only your skill set. It is also giving back of the way you interacted, the way there was an interplay, the way the emotion connected. And how can we take Mahesh's mind and put it in 1,000 people around us and say, hey, we are ready for social enterprise. We'll get the funding. Are 1,000 people able to do 1,000 such stories, one each, 1,000 people in 1 year? That will bring about
How
social.
incredible. How
And
incredible would that be?
because
Absolutely.
this kind of talk should not be done for just one person talking and going off and everybody erasing it from the memory. It should go deep in and it should connect inside. Otherwise, what is the use of doing this? Then let us say 1,000. And 1,000 is a small figure in today's world. I could have done
Correct.
1,000 in 3 months without this. So what is the big deal? And that is why when you bring in the purveyor and the image maker, the artist, you bring in the Pope and the Michelangelo. So let's bring everybody in together. That's how New School was created. New School did not happen by photographers. That's why I asked you to see who is here. Not just by photographers, but the ones who buy photographers, the ones who impact photography. So printers, process guys, designers. And we nurtured them for 3 years. New School didn't happen just like that. It was nurtured. We took them to Compression Curve, brought them to Fisherman's Cove, got all those guys to come to Fisherman's Cove. We had danced on the beach at a rock band. All the top guy, Muhammad Khan and all that come there. Now we developed them, and every photographer brought up families also. Shantanu, I told him, bring his wife. And we talked to our wives and told them what to do, and we'll push her in the pool. Also to break the ice. We did a huge amount to bring the humanity of photographers being like people, ordinary people.
Yeah.
Your family is also part of it. What an amazing adventure for the family and for you.
Absolutely.
From childhood, I'll take my children 4 years and 5 years to Sinar in Switzerland when I could afford little money. You understand? So I'm saying that involvement must be deep from the basic. Otherwise, how this Canada School of Empathy is one of the greatest things that's happening.
Yeah.
Because they're taught teachings 8-year-old and 10-year-olds how to look at a baby and learn from the baby what is affecting the baby. And those stories become very powerful stories because they're learning, and there is no more playground bullying after they went through this kind of infant course. And academic results shut up.
Yeah.
And I'm talking this, because I come from a lineage of, educators. So that's why I'm saying that when I see these kind of things, why can't we make those changes here? So among the top guys, at least we can, what Mahesh is doing, we may not be able to do a drastic social change, but we can come in the bigger language of things.
I agree. I totally agree on this, Sudesh.
Start. But then the youngsters, the kids, I think we've got to nurture them into empathy so that, listen, one thing, don't be scared of anybody in this world. But the most important thing, love one another. It's important. And if they can see this, that's why the Ashoka things, why is Ashoka so successful? 80, now 90 countries. The 4,000 social entrepreneurs. What Mahesh is doing is a social entrepreneurship. He is one of the only textual, visual, narrators in this country. How many are the textual, visual? Each of the pieces, if you say, they are such beautifully formed, small ones in his post, in his mind, his style in those days.
Yeah.
Look at today. So having observed him over time, I'm just saying these are the people and these are the poses, these are the guys who should be pushed out, but they are only instruments. But we need to connect with those people and the emotion of the people below and make them all part of our instruments of change. Otherwise, it won't happen. There has been massive change, and this is the ideal opportunity. What is happening? When Mahesh has narrated everything that has happened, it's a storybook tale. Today it looks like heavy duty. The same suffering is happening now. For us, it's no big deal. It is episode 2, that's all. We have done it once already, so what's the big deal, man? But I'm saying, unless you make it holistic, unless all the players are playing together, unless families and everyone is involved, and especially bring in, like, why did Ivan Anthar come and the whole gang come? I'll show you faxes on my own letters, restored ones we were doing the last few days. Faxes are written to all these guys. Shantanu, go and meet so-and-so. I'm talking to Delhi. I'm talking to so-and-so. Mahesh is writing to me writing like that. It's like a huge revolution was happening. Now today, I'm asking Jesse, in this world, in 55 odd, what are we doing? 500 we should be having. And we should be having not just these guys, everybody involved in digital photography, but everyone else. I'm glad to see Vicky here, but everyone else was impacted by it. Everyone else cannot understand us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Importers into our parties. We brought in government guys to understand them. We brought in clients. Every client, we were sending out this, you won't miss this. We were writing to the bosses. I have letters which shows, if you don't miss this nicely, this is what will happen. Brookbound, this is what will happen. So send your advertising guys. You won't be initiated. You won't understand. So there's a huge amount of work. I visited many of these Kodak in Rochester as well as in Sinar in Switzerland and now multiple times to make them understand the whole thing. Then as ambassador to the World Council for Asia, I sat in the World Council meetings also. I was representing Asia at that time as president of IPA. And that time, we used to make them understand also what big changes they can do. That is how Ireland, we had a big workshop, the first workshop. So I'm saying that, when you have to do big, just dream big. It has to happen. What Mahesh has done in his own way, steadfastly, with one long focus, long path game, taking in his own books, one of these books. I mean, I don't see it as just a book to be wiped away and to be forgotten. These are books which should be followed by people on how they can bring narratives to make power statements that can change our country with empathy. If you don't do that, we are nothing. So this whole value that we are looking at, each one should do this. What Mahesh has done is a value creation, right? Now we have to look at how can we create value. We have to teach our people. You create value over anything you want, but find out what is your next best thing that you're good at. Learn how to do personal branding. It's so important today. Personal branding is so important. There's a guy called Gary. Please read his book and crush it. He has created multi-millionaires. Any Indian can do it. Come on, yeah. I don't understand why not. But first of all, be human. The whole thing that Mahesh is talking about is being human. It's a humanistic venture. So that is why social entrepreneurship. Nobody is saying that you're going to lose money, you're going to gain money. But call it non-profit. You take your money, nobody's stopping it, but you're changing the whole scenario, the whole landscape is going to change. Now you're doing something worthwhile. Yes. Now you're doing something where you're impacted millions, not just talking and sharing the stories. And then they forget and you don't know why. Bring in all these holistic people, integrate them, integrate all the players in the field. Only then you've got things moving.
Yeah.
Other bullshit. It won't work like this. It'll work, but look at the way you have scaled it up to another level, but scale it among multiple players and everyone will join in because they want to understand what is wrong with the industry. How do I do? What is this Photoshop? How does it work? Yesterday was cameras, films, then came digital. Tomorrow is apps. It's already gone to apps. In fact, all of Vijay's lights are all apps here. And from apps is going into what, like the way Picasso is saying, multiple dimensions, right? Now I'm seeing instantly, I think within a year, we are creating perspectives of different dimensions in one shot because sensors are being developed like that in the cameras. So I'm experimenting with that to understand that, no, that's mind only, leave it. But the heart can't change, Social and our human father to child, how can it change child to father? Those are things that if you can impact, that is true social change. And every one of those articles in Mahesh's book, is worth studying it. It's not just the unsung heroes. Just trying to understand that. Now, he is the man who has made him so vulnerable, self-effacing, talking to people, and then getting it. But his journey, you can understand how he got those crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, talk to people in that level who can give funds to make it happen. He didn't take just like the monies. You take 500 copies, I'll give and pay me for that. Can you take it in advance? That's what he said. It's a transactional thing. Do it with pride. Anybody can do it. So, but decide what you want to do. If somebody's a good cook at home today, why can't they just sell it? And why can't photography have that? And image making or whatever. And so why can't somebody do those kind of imagery and help them out? I'm doing quite a lot. I'm helping many of those who are startup moms for free, and I would like to do it because photography is our blood, right? It's our DNA. So like that, multiple things are there. What pushed Mahesh step by step over the years to do this kind of thing? First, he did on his own. He scaled it up when multiple photographers got into it, and Dinesh, accorded that facility. Then he went on to another method of communication in media in Goa, and so on. Now, how do we take this up and multiply it? How do you create that awareness and everybody gets into the larger conversation? I'm not expecting that multiple change will happen in our country. It'll take time. But if you can do it from the youth, Mahesh, where you are now, the teenagers, the Gen X, and I mean, we can go to the Gen Zs and so on, and even below, I think we'll make remarkable changes. We should be going out to schools and talking.
So isn't it so imperative that a photographer is, I mean, the new age photographer should be so versatile in every genre of image making?
Of course, computational imagery is tomorrow, right? Yeah. Right from there, right from traditional, what you do in 8x10 and what you do in analog, how to understand the principles of, like in Bruce Lee's, how you learn how to be all the Karate Kid, how to learn those. All that happens only in the lab with the analog, right? And you take it around that path.
Sure.
Are you saying today just because this is there, every shot of mine today is recorded? Not because we did just this, because of that principle, that habit is there. My guys, assistants of pastor, sir, do you use meter? I said, of course I do. And depending on the medium, I studied each medium. I use a diamond 500 to understand every point of contrast. And according to the medium, I make my people sure, because I want them to come through with that. Yes, we do it. So when I saw Mahesh, he's getting into the lab, he's getting people to do that, at least they'll understand the principles of it, the discipline of it. And that should be natural, as brushing teeth, nothing else. Don't think too much about it, like it's a heavy duty. No, you're born to do that. Because you are as an image maker, and image maker is an art maker, not the so-called photographer. Whatever photography, even if it is mobile, you are making art. First of all, believe that it is going to be there. It is going to influence somebody. He is doing social change to influence somebody. You better accept that. It has to be inspiring. It has to touch people. It has to be an amazing, rich experience. How the fuck it will work when it is not like that? How? It is beyond this combination that hits people and impacts them. Now you'll see how things will change. This is how we should talk to our clients. This is how we should connect and vulnerably talk to the people who need it, the have-nots.
Yeah.
I think, he's far ahead, and we have to see that whatever Mahesh is doing, we should give him that leadership and see that it moves to a different position, because he himself doesn't, maybe not knowing. I see it from far, having seen his progress over. I see the people today, and what Jesse is doing, I was stunned when I heard about what he's been progressing, and I was thinking myself, maybe there are so many lacunas, how do we fill it and take it to a different position? We'll change our country, man. Yeah. We'll make our country less, what should I use the right word? That we don't fight too much among ourselves. As one word, I don't, Dinesh, you help me out. Less aggressive, more gentle. One of the words.
More harmony among ourselves.
Pardon?
More harmony among ourselves. That's very important.
Inside, but you know what? 20th century was the age of self-introspection. 21st century is only empathy, age of empathy. Yeah. Now you think about your inside, bring it out and connect with people and human beings as your own. So that's why this Canada has done this amazing thing. Ashoka is doing this beautiful thing. Why can't we join and become one of the social entrepreneurs? You point me to a business. I always tell my clients, point me to a business and make a business out of it. Why? Because I'm confident that there are pain points, and these pain points can be converted into attributes. I tell any client, I can convert any pain point into attributes. If you don't tell me a pain point, I will question status quo and I will go and do my interviews. How do you do interviews? It has to be very generative. Generative means very humanistic. And how do you do elsewise? It has to be very qualitative, not quantitative, not a form that you send everybody and then you take. No, I do qualitative. The answers he gives is the way I answer that. The next question. Once this qualitative is done and we put the whole thing, we join the dots and we come up with certain things. Joining dots itself is an intellectual exercise which we need to develop from childhood. Tuck, 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 this is what I'll do. It's like the guys who make great accounts and why they are in the accounts level. But I'm saying if you do all these, I think that this country, there's no, I mean, nobody can match it, man. Awesome, because we have that one thing, we are technically human because we are so God-fearing, so loving. We have within ourselves, within our own families. So why we can't do that, I can't understand. I'm sorry, I'm taking you.
No. No.
I told you, if I come this, I was telling the other time to Shantanu, just tell me not to say for it.
No. Sudhir, it doesn't, you shouldn't look at it that way. It's good. I mean, it's something, a knowledge share. I mean, it's your experience, what you speak is definitely is going to be useful for all the viewers, there's no doubt about it. And Mahesh, I mean, it's a great journey what Mahesh is.
Absolutely.
So
very inspiring, very, very inspiring.
Yeah, while I want to ask something, Mahesh. While you're published, I mean, 2 or 3 books right now. How important is printing in this Instagram frenzy world? What would you tell the young budding artists that are coming up?
Oh, it's that's a subject for another webinar actually, or a workshop. But printing, I think in any form is just it's quite a spiritual experience for me and others. I'm sure all of us who have gone through that. To develop that. I keep telling my students, develop a love for paper. To understand different kinds of paper. How does it impact colors? How does it receive colors, inks? Is it coated, not coated? It's such a vast subject. So
Absolutely.
Understand paper. That's what I keep telling everybody. That's very important. Then understand inks. What are different kinds of inks? How do they react? And the processes, like you have your RGB process or the CMYK process, the offset, the digital offset, Epson, all these different possibilities. So it's very deep. There's a lot of science. There's a lot of heart in it. That needs to be, a lot of heart needs to be in it. But that can only happen when you really, really understand your paper and the processes. But for that to happen, you really have to spend time.
Yeah.
On the press, on printing, on when I go and print, I choose my printer very carefully where I print, and I'm allergic to the printing inks. In the sense I get a headache, but I still have to go. I still go and stand there and go out every 5 minutes to get some fresh air. So, but it's important to have that very deeply ingrained in you. The paper, the print, the inks, and how it looks on paper is very important. So that's something that you really need to understand. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank
you. Yeah.
Just one question. I don't know, Jesse, are we coming towards the end of time? Or are we already at 2 hours plus?
We are already at 2 hours. So maybe
Mahesh, since you have been involved with education, since you have been involved with opening up people's minds in terms of photography and a lot more now with your involvement with Srishti and design and everything, I would want to, before we wind up, hear your views, since you deal with so many young people who currently would be standing at the kind of a crossroads which no one in the present humanity has ever stood for. I don't want you to be a soothsayer. I'm not saying make a forecast. I'm not saying, look at a crystal ball. But what is the sense you get which you would communicate to younger photographers or image makers or, people who are just setting out? There is this, great sense of uncertainty, a great sense of not knowing, which is even scarier. of what to do and how to do it. So I'm sure, and I don't want to put you into a spot in terms of what do you think a person should do, but just a general sense, what is it that you feel, or what is it that you speak to? Because I'm sure your students are coming to you and wanting to discuss things, wanting to know. So could you just kind of share it with the larger audience here?
Yeah, it's a difficult difficult question. However, what I can say is that this crossroads come ever so often in one's life, maybe several times, and this particular crossroad is a little more difficult than the others, that I have seen in my life. I would only say that I think it's a little amplified. The fear is a little more amplified because of the times that we live in terms of social media and the media itself. However, I think what I tell my students, what I would tell anyone is that don't be scared. Be careful, but don't be scared. Life will change. Life, because the impact is very big. But the life will definitely go on. There are new avenues that will open up, and then you have to choose where your path. So one thing is that I give them from my own experience, some options how to navigate these crossroads. And basic thing fundamentally is two things: is that don't lose heart, and always try and develop the ability to think critically, which has been lacking in our society and also among our youngsters in the last several years. And don't give up hope, don't lose heart, but develop the ability to think critically, and that's what I say. And then things will, I think, slowly by themselves, each person sort of thinks for himself or herself. So that's what I say. Critical thinking is very important, and not to lose heart. It's very difficult at times, but not to lose heart. Is all I can say.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Jesse, would you want to ask questions from YouTube or?
YouTube, there is
questions always.
So there are all praises, so there's not a question, but I have a couple of things in my mind. That first of all, let me tell everybody out there that I have put in some links, but I will be editing those again after this session and adding other links as well of Mahesh Bhat's work, and you can just go and check. And you have any query, please, you can always get back, and I think I will forward that question to him and probably get the answer and revert back to you. So you can always go there and check. Now what Dinesh sir has asked was very relevant, but I have another thing in my mind which I wanted to ask, that instant gratification is, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, has been one of the worst nightmares of learning in a way, particularly in terms of photography, because as you rightly mentioned, that slowing down the process was very, very important. I think that helped people like you and everybody build the foundation, and very strong foundation at that. Now, today, digital era, even though you might not want, you might not like, but the fact still remains that you can immediately see the results. How do you handle these situations, and how do you inculcate this habit of slowing down in this digital era in your students?
I would only keep repeating one thing that I heard many years ago from the great photographer Gordon Parks. For the people who don't know, Gordon Parks was the first African American photographer to have entered the doors of Vogue magazine. He was a fashion photographer, he was a filmmaker, he was a writer, he was a composer, he was a documentary photographer. They call him the Renaissance man of American photography. He said that, his autobiography is called Choice of Weapons, I think. He uses photography, camera as a weapon of change, for change. So what he said is that if you want to be a photographer, you can replace that photographer with anything else. You have to have something to say. I saw it in a little video long back, and he points to his head and said, "You have to have something to say." So that's all I would, that developing, that having something to say is the most important part. That won't come instantly. All right. So that's solid. Like what Sudhir said, is develop that empathy. Developing that empathy, you have to have that in your mind. Okay, you have to inculcate that in your mind. So having something to say is what is important. Developing that is going to be slow. It doesn't come in instantly. So that's what I keep telling my students in my classes, that have something, try to develop things to say, have something to say. So it sounds very simple, but it isn't.
Yeah, I understand it. I think, but it's a wonderful advice. Wonderful advice.
Like Gordon Park said that.
One question I had in my mind while I was looking through your work, is that you have chosen to, especially when I'm talking about your work that you've done in May 2020 right now, and that laborers and Bangalore, and particularly they are black and white. You've chosen black and white as the medium. Does this thought process come because of your, so if you can show that. So does this thought process come because of your stint in with the film photography, film medium, or was there some particular reason for doing that?
Well, somebody asked me this question. I said, in today's thought process, generally, it's become so binarized world. It's only black and white, and there are no shades of gray. So I thought I'll show my images in shades of gray.
Okay.
Is what I said. I agree. I mean, it's not just an off-the-cuff remark, but that's what it was. However, there was an inspiration to it. The great photographers David and Peter Turnley, who live in US and Paris. I mean, David is a good friend of mine. I mean, we got him to once for Goa. Both of them did this amazing piece of work, amazing body of work in Paris and New York on the lockdown diaries. They call it the lockdown days photograph. People, the daily lives. When Peter went out every day shooting, all through the 4 months, that itself is an amazing thing for young
I've been
photographers.
sharing that on Facebook, so if anyone wants to look, I mean, it's all there. It's such wonderful work.
David has been doing this phenomenally beautiful images of life in Paris recently, and both are black and white shooters, and that series inspired me to also. And apart from what I said about shades of gray, that we need to inculcate in our thinking, also the work of David and Pete Turnley. Yeah.
All right. These images are very, very powerful. Even your unsung, that's been amazing. Very, very powerful imagery.
Thank you. But it was a very powerful moment. It was really shook me. This whole thing shook me much more than Sri Lankan war or tsunami or anything. It was unbelievable. The kind of suffering I saw that day. It again was made possible by a student of mine she was volunteering there, and very young, she's in the second year of a 4-year program. She's volunteering, day in and day out with her friends, giving out food, to people, looking after giving sanitary napkins to women. Nobody thought about it. How are they going to manage? These kids were doing some fantastic work. And she called me and said, "This is what's happening." And so I went there, and at Samyukta, that's because of her, I spent this time shooting. So I'm always listening to my students all the time. So that was also a very important part that happened. It is quite a thing that day. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's phenomenal kind of work that you've done, and I'm so glad that and thanks to Dinesh sir that we are having you here today, and we could listen to this amazing journey. And I think there is one very important remark that has come on YouTube by Monica Singh, and I think I would like to agree with that. That sums it up. That wonderful work. Such people deserve Padma Shri. So I think, and going by that, I immediately thought that photographers are a neglected and community. I think nobody has been thinking about photographers and the kind of body of work that you people have created, and the way and photographer is one of the most important link in bringing the world closer and making it smaller and making things, people see things which otherwise would not have been possible, and they've been doing this for decades all together, and hardly anybody has recognized them um, the way they should have been. I think he deserve more, and you deserve more.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I mean, Sudarak Holwe did get a Padma Shri.
Yes.
He deserved it. So, great work. An amazing photographer that he is.
Matter of time, matter of time.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Dinesh, what is your observation of Mahesh?
Sorry?
What is your observation in your path with?
I've lost Sudhir's voice. I didn't get the question.
He said, "What is your observation of me?"
Yeah. What's your observation of Mahesh?
Generous, gentle, committed, concerned individual. I won't even say photographer. Photography just happens to be a vehicle which he uses to speak and to share and to comment. And because I have been, fortunate enough to be, our paths have, whether it was through New School earlier, then with Unsung, then with Serendipity and the work which, he did at the exhibition there. Subsequently, he brought me in to come and also do some classes at one school. So, my interest in teaching and sharing my experiences is thanks to Mahesh. And this is something which I've stayed on with, and I really enjoy and I love doing that now. But over the last few years, what I've been seeing with what he's doing is it's not just about photography, it's his concern for the environment, it's his concern for society. Whereas he's very clear about where he stands in terms of personal belief politically, yet he's open-minded enough and liberal enough in the true sense of the word and not the label to understand the fact that they are, diverse views about the same thing, including there could be conflicting ones. And I think it needs an extremely sensitive person with a great depth of experience and empathy, which is a word which I love, which which Sudhir uses so often, and he brings so much meaning to that, is something which Mahesh has lived his life with.
Thank you.
Absolutely fantastic. Very well done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that.
जैसी ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਵਾਰੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੁਣ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹੋ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਕਾਫੀ ਹੁਣ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਾਓ you can't take the Punjabi.
I think these sessions
I can only be that serious for that long.
I think these sessions are phenomenal. I think there's so much to learn, and today's session has been special. And let me be honest, and because for the first time we are hearing from somebody who has seen the education in terms of photography move from film era to digital era, and how he's been managing best of both the worlds, and how he's done that phenomenally well. And what you said was human being, good individual, good person. I think one thing that I would like to take away from this session is that be a good human being. photography will happen. And if you understand how to handle cameras and you have little spark about photography, you will be a wonderful photographer. It cannot happen the other way around. Don't try to be a good photographer and still forget about being a good human being. I think that has been missing in today's generation most of the times that we see. And
no, I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. Give the current generation the chance. All of us were probably like this when we were 21, 22, 23.
Yeah.
Okay, who are very concerned about where is your life, where is it going, what can I get for myself, how will I build my life. I'm 63. It's very easy for me to look back the last 40, 50 years and say, मैं इतना महान, मैं नहीं महान, or I have so much confidence in the young people, and I'm fortunate enough to have two daughters who struck out on their own, do their own thing, and I call them my mentors because they teach me. I look at today's world through their eyes. I mean, I don't know today's world. I don't want to know today's world except the way they can explain it to me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
It's just it's just the people in these 5 boxes right now. We are the tenants of this world. We are no longer the owners. All right.
Yeah.
The owners are the ones in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
So let's give it to them.
Let's give it to
No,
them.
absolutely. I mean, the world they are living in is very different from what we lived, Dinesh, like rightly said, right? So I think it's more of there's a little bit of empathy that should come into each one of us, and a sense of responsibility towards the community and the society at large. That's very important. And I think rather than looking at feeling jealous and looking at how others are working at, rather look at your work and look at your creativity and try to better yourself and be a better human being. That's the only thing I would rather tell every photographer and the community.
What you're saying, Vijay, is that one of the very huge shifts from the 80s, 90s to today is the role of technology in our lives. All right, technology is, where by its very definition, and Sudhir, correct me if I'm wrong in my understanding, is supposed to make life easier for human beings.
Yeah, sure.
At the individual level and at the society level. But technology is only a tool. Technology is not a way of life. Unfortunately, we've gone and confused the two. All right. And that probably, because of the speed which it allows convenient living, makes people seem to be unempathetic because they are moving faster than they would normally do. So I would step back and take a look at what actually the world is about and what a 22-year-old actually has to deal with, and I would find a great deal of empathy for them in their lives and the struggles they will have right now and will have to be going through. But I don't grudge them that. And I don't say, okay, I will minimize your struggle. Struggle is part of the entire evolution.
It's a life. That's what is life is.
That's what life is. That's what life is. Absolutely.
Go walk, fall, trip, get up, move on. It's your world.
Yeah. We used to talk about value, the word value as value, of course, value itself in terms of valuation. And A for authority in your own work and creating that and being adaptable. L for being able to look beyond and seeing opportunities by which you can actually create good for people who need it, and apart from just being able to look into a picture, but how to use that opportunity and your art to make that change. U for understanding people, that whole concept of understanding, for empathy. So that's how I always define the value itself. So when I go with my kids have their kids, and I resonate with what you're saying, Dinesh. We tend to, as grandparents, go down to parents, and parents has to go down to the kids, and you see at certain stage there are no differences. And I'm basically talking to every one of my friends, including Radha's children, including Kiran's children, at any point of time, and they are sharing their work. And what they're doing in their own entrepreneurial space, because they're all entrepreneurs in their own. One is making a film, brother's son. The other one is cooking. She's got a damn good enterprise. Kiran's children are doing their own in their own startup enterprises, and Bela's children are doing. So all the guys who are photographers, today we are talking to them. They come home. They spend a lot of time here. So that connection can only happen if I'm in their wavelength. If I behave like a parent or a father, and I don't want to behave.
Doesn't work.
Right.
Then I go with my daughter, you're calling sir here so many times. But with my daughter, we have an unwritten rule. She's the boss. She calls me Sudhir, period. And she's the second daughter, the one who's Sheetal in Bombay. So I'm just saying that, and hey, dad, what you're doing? You're in Trafalgar, you're shooting the same place again. Okay, I'm joining. And they land up like that and they sleep in my bedroom and I push off in the morning, early morning, and I'm shooting the place. And then they'll join, hey, have some peanuts, have this thing, and so on. So it's that kind of, I think, that connection. So I understand when Mahesh talks about how it is with the children. I take students from NID, I take students from Kava every year, and from the US. I'm saying, I changed completely. There was one session I did with NIDians where we had each student take their favorite author, favorite artist. One went into Rothko, one into Van Gogh, and so on. So each one was getting photography. I just immersed and lost myself. So my office, once he gets into this, office is closed for days, it's over. So, we part as friends and they come and hire me. And I've done Bombay Rocks, award-winning magazine, with one of my students in NID, because he hired me after the shoot. So multiple people have hired me from the student base. As we are equals or they are better. So it is our own humility. That's why that whole, when I talk about vulnerability, that humanity is so, that gone are the days of your dad and you can't talk or you can talk only this much. I don't do that. I mean, why do we need to? Because as long as your principles are fair and clear, where do you have to worry? That once the clarity is there. And so many times they have rushed to be by my side when I needed help or the other way around or whatever. That's, and not only in terms of this, including business or including enterprises. We talk about businesses continuously. Here is my daughter from the US will come tell me, Dad, what's the LinkedIn big data is out. And she'll start telling what all the new things that has come in. Now, I like to hear it. I want to hear that, And I tell them what I'm doing in my space, how I'm marrying photography with so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. And now these are the white papers I've done last night, and those are the white papers I'm doing yesterday. And so I share a lot of white papers with them. So I think that generation gap, as before, that diminished or wiped out completely. I don't expect, they fire me sometimes. And I'm so happy to say that. That's the thing.
Same here. I tell them that means you're at least noticing what I'm doing.
No, I'm totally with that. And it's so wonderful. That is why I think it makes it easier that we have got multiple partners now working with us, in different generations. So this multi-generational gaps don't exist anymore. That kind of thing is completely not there. And we can rest assured, I think my girls are awesome. And I'm sure Dinesh is too. I've been seeing his posts and so on. And I cannot say they're doing more than boys because all men will be against me. But I can say definitely they are equal to them. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mahesh. Thank you, Sudhir. Thank you, Vijay. Thank you for the platform, for the time, for all the effort. Over to you, Jesse.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and thank you, Mahesh, for sharing those insightful, and giving us rare insight into your journey. That's been so inspiring for all of us here. I think what we will say is that just smile, thumbs up, because I will just take one screenshot of all of us together. So just broad smiles and thumbs up. And
All right.
yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye.
Thanks. Yeah. Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.